Welcome back to the Burning Bench. Today I am going to show you how to make a band. We're going to fabricate it out of flat silver stock. This silver stock is 3 by 1.5. We'll make the band, and then I will show you how to make it into a half round. A lot of file work, but it's good exercise. Everything that you are going to do in this project is basically repeating. You'll be repeating that and repeating that and repeating that for just about all jewelry. It's just a matter of modification depending upon the application you have. I am a fabricator. I love to fabricate. One of my favorite things to do is to take an existing mounting, modify it, and make it look like it was built that way. I love it. Excuse me a second, I need some coffee. Love my coffee. Well, let's determine that this is going to be a size 7. I'm going to take my mandrel, locate size 7. Now I have some, it's just regular lead solder, not lead solder, they don't use lead in solder anymore, but it's a low temp solder. And I'm going to take my my mandrel, and I'm going to stick it in my hole. Now, if you remember on episode 1, I told you about these holes. They're very convenient. Let's stick it in this one. No, we don't see it as well in that one, so let's stick it in this one so we can see it better. Okay, so I'm going to locate size 7 on here. I'm just going to take this and put it around. It's very pliable. Bend it, and I'm going to make it just a little bit shorter. Then I'm going to take my silver stock, and so we know where our mark was. Take my side cutters, cut it. So if all goes well, this is going to be a size 7. What I need to do now is take and flush the ends out so I can get a nice fit when I go to solder it. So I'm going to take my half round, okay. If this was gold, I would anneal it first. Annealing is the process wherein you take and you heat the piece of metal, and then you let it cool naturally. You don't quench it. Okay, now I'm going to take my mandrel, and I'm going to take and bend this around my mandrel. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a rawhide mallet, and you see how I'm bracing the mandrel here against me. Sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I'll just take it and put it in the holes I have. Just depends upon the application, but for this application I'll probably be better off to hold it for a little bit at first. Maybe not. Let's go ahead and put it in a hole. There we go. Plus you'll be able to see it better if I do put it in a hole. Okay, so let's... Now when we're doing this, we want to make sure that we keep our stock square to the mandrel. Otherwise, when you bend it, it's going to bend at odd angles. You'll be able to straighten it up, but it just makes it easier when you're trying to match it up to solder it if it's bent square. Now the other reason why I'm using the mandrel versus a pair of shank pliers is because if I use shank pliers, it takes and you'll actually get sharp bends in that, and they're a lot harder to take out once you want to go and round it on the mandrel. with silver, it's not that much of an issue. Now what I'll do is I'll go down and go to a smaller size on the mandrel than I need it and bend it. Okay. So this is the part where, see, if you look, I've bent them pretty square. And that's what we want. That's pretty ideal. I am going to use shank pliers here. I just need to find them. Give me a sec. I'm gonna have a drink of coffee. Love my coffee. Okay. Shank pliers. Remember our shank pliers? They're the ones that have the half round nose, and then the cradle is made out of a nylon. You can see I've used these for a lot. They're not inexpensive pliers, but they're worth the purchase. It's not quite flush, but there's a trick I use that really helps flushing things up. And just grab a saw blade. Now I want to show you a trick for putting your blade in the frame. And you can see this doesn't have any adjusters to tighten it up with. It's just the frame. A lot of saw blades you have, this comes down and then there's a screw here and you can adjust the tension of the saw blade. Well, that's really slow. So just like any blade, you want the teeth pointing towards you when you put them in your saw. So we'll put this side in, and then I'll put this side in. Now here's where the trick comes in, the way you get tension. I just lean against the saw frame with my chest and then tighten it up. It's tight. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and just saw down the seam, and what that does is it flushes both sides out even and you get a good fit. Now we got a good clean fit. Now I have a good clean fit. I don't have any mouse in my pocket, honest. Okay, so we are flushing this out. Just like I said earlier, like we do on any size up, size down, we match the two ends as close as we can. Business end again. Now this is silver. Silver requires, see, silver disperses heat. Gold doesn't disperse heat like silver does. Silver is a great conductor of heat. Well, to combat that, what we need to do is we need to have a more volume, a bigger flame. So I'm going to take this flame. If you're using a jeweler's torch, for most of my work on gold, I use a number 5 tip. For this operation, I'm going to use a number 6 tip. And I put the tip on the torch. Yeah, if you remember from our other episodes, that flame is not near this big. We got big flame now. I like big flames. There we go. Now you can even hear the sound if you remember from episode 1 and 2, or 2 and 3. Um, you don't hear the torch. See, you can hear this torch. So that's because we have a lot more heat. And when we have a lot more heat, make sure that your torch rack is really pointed away from everything. I have caught this on fire more than once, and I've had to replace them a couple times because I catch them on fire. Okay, so moving on. The next step is my denatured alcohol and boric acid powder. We want to eliminate as much fire scale as possible. Put it in our tweezers. We get our solder pick. Make sure our solder pick's clean. Then we get some silver solder. And I like to use sheet solder because I can adjust the size of my pieces. If you get paste solder, I just don't like paste solder because you don't have control over where the solder is. You want to be able to see that solder ball up. You want to put it right on the place that you're soldering. Otherwise it will leave a trail sometimes. Especially silver solder will leave a trail where it kind of melts into the metal as it's melting, and you have to file that out. And sometimes if you're dealing with a thin piece of metal, it can make your metal too thin by the time you get that mark out. And so I just take and when I cut it, I just take and hold my finger over it like this so the pieces don't fly anywhere, and then I lay it down on my pad where it belongs. Next step, let's solder. As I do before I solder anything, I put my flux on it. Yeah. Pick up solder. I burn off the flux. Put my solder down. Heat it. And then I always go and heat it from the back side. And the reason for heating it from the back side is that you have to suck that solder through. If the flame's really hot, sometimes your solder will just roll around the seam and it won't be soldered all the way through. So if you suck it through, that way you stand a better chance of making sure that you have that really, really solid solder. Normally you would you'd file the inside of the ring before you round it out. Well, because it's so flat where I put it together, I'm going to put it on my mounder, round it a little bit, just so when I file it, I get a nice even file. Now, I'm going to take my inside ring file, my half round file, and flush that out. So we did that. If we use the right amount of solder, we don't have a lot to file off. I'm just gonna flush that a little bit, that a little bit, and this a little bit. Now I'm going to take okay, if you look, it's not quite round. What we have to do is we have to, when we're rounding a ring out, we round it both sides. In other words, I'm going and then I'm going to turn the ring around, do the same thing. Okay, see, now we got a nice round ring here. Next step, we're going to flush the sides and smooth them with our emery board. I think I have a little coarser one here. Yeah, this one's newer. So I'm going to go with my coarsest side first. I turned it over to my finer side. Now I'm going to go down to my worn out emery board. I want to make this a half round. I mean, you can do a flat shank. That's acceptable, but personally, I think if you practice making a half round, it's going to build a lot of good skills, hand-eye skills, and coordination with your file. I like using hand tools. As I said in episode 1, it's something about hitting that metal with a file that just, I don't know, for me it's almost then like, just like my coffee. Oh, Cafe Du Monde. Ooh, great coffee. So I went and I got a little bit tighter shot so you can see what I'm going to do here. It's difficult because of my file gets in the way, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, and you see this edge right here. I'm going to trim that edge on both sides to an even amount from the inside of the shank. In other words, say if this is a little thicker and I wanted this sidewall to be a half millimeter, then I try to take and cut it the same distance all the way around. One trick you can use is, if you want, especially in the beginning, is you can take your divider and you can actually turn it down here. Score a line of where you want the dome to meet the side of the sidewall of the ring. That's one trick I used to use in the beginning, but I've been doing it long enough now I pretty well can eyeball it. And the cool thing about jewelry, when I was first starting to make jewelry, I used to measure everything exact and put it together, and it just didn't seem to be eye clean. Jewelry is eye clean. If you take a wedding set that has a band that'll fit on both sides from a manufacturer, one side fits really well, the other side not so well. So it's just a matter of looking like it's balanced when it's done, and you're good to go. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my half round file again, and I'm going to cut it. My sidewall is probably 3/4 of a millimeter. Another important thing is to see how I'm using my bench pin. I've actually got my ring braced in there pretty tight. Sometimes the file will grab it because the way silver is. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep my filing pressure against the bench pin and not this way. Now I'm going to turn it over, do the other side. Then we look down our ring, make sure both sides look even. We trim up any place where they're not even. Next, I'll go and look down, sight down my ring. Make sure that our bevel is relatively even on both sides. And it's looking pretty good. Here's a shallow place. Now that we have that, now we're going to kind of rough in our dome. So to do the dome, I'm going to take and do a shallower cut right across the top. Now I'm going to take my emery board again. You see how I'm using my emery board? I'm moving it all around. Well, the reason I do that is because if I just filed in one place like this with the emery board, I would get a flat place. We don't want a flat place. I want to make sure that the ring is even and rounded, so I get a nice dome on it. Again, I sight down it. I make sure that I have a nice dome on it. Then I take the smoother side of the emery board and I go back over it again. Okay. It's pretty simple, but everything you need to know about working on jewelry is basically inside making a band. Your skills that you work on are hand-eye coordination, soldering skills, shaping, and then you got a nice band to wear once you're done. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this over, I'm going to polish it, and I will come back and show you the finished piece. Be back in a bit. Well, here's our finished ring. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Well, I guess that does it for another episode of The Burning Bench. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at logan1studio@aol.com. Next time, I'm going to show you how to repair tips and prongs. Till then, this is Willie. Thanks for tuning in.